It is 43 AD. As the sun cast its morning glow across the plain, Aulus Plautius, a seasoned Roman commander, observed the River Medway. On the far bank, the tribal warriors of Briton, under the leadership of Togodumnus and Caratacus of the Togodumnus, stood in formation. They had chosen their ground well, using the river as a natural barrier, confident that the Romans would struggle to cross without a bridge. Plautius discerned the positioning of their forces, understanding the absence of a bridge was a danger to his troops and hamper any advancement. The Britons had likely spent days preparing their defenses, setting up ambush points and reinforcing their position with the dense forests that flanked the river. To charge headlong into such an obstacle would be folly, but Plautius was an experienced veteran with years of military command. He had fought across the empire, from the Danube to the Rhine. He continued to carefully study the enemy's deployment. He took note of their strengths and weaknesses, their formations and potential vulnerabilities. Roman scouts had reported that while the Britons fought fiercely, they lacked discipline in prolonged engagements. Their greatest advantage lay in the terrain, and if that advantage could be neutralized, the balance of power would shift. He knew it would not be long until Rome's invasion of Britain would finally result in a decisive battle. If you live in the United States, your personal information is likely exposed online. Sites like White Pages, Being Verified, and Radaris collect and publish your name, address, phone number, even your relatives' names, all without your consent. This makes you an easy target for scammers, identity thieves, and even harassment. Manually removing your data from these sites takes hours, and even then new ones keep appearing. That's where easy opt-outs comes in. For just $19.99 a year, they systematically remove your personal information, making you much harder to find online. This isn't just about privacy, it's about security. If you work in any profession where you interact with the public, keeping your personal details hidden can help protect you from threats and unwanted contact. Businesses benefit as well by reducing exposure to fraud and phishing attacks. Easy opt-outs doesn't spam mass removal requests like some services. They work like an actual person would, efficiently and effectively. No tracking, no shady data sharing, just real privacy protection. Take control of your online presence. Try easy opt-outs today. Visit the link in the description and try it out for just $19.99 a year. It is the 1st century AD. Britain was inhabited by several British tribes with varying relationships with each other, and with the mightiest entity within Europe, the Roman Empire. In the south, some tribes had regular interactions with Rome, through trade or diplomacy, while others, particularly in the north and west, remained more isolated. Some tribes, like the Togodumnus, aggressively expanded into neighboring territories, seeking control over trade routes and fertile lands, and their growing influence was felt across the southeastern part of the island. In 54 BC, Julius Caesar led a brief and highly publicized invasion of Britain. His mission was to support the Trinovantes, a tribe in the southeast. Caesar's campaign, while notable, lasted only 2 months and was more about securing Rome's prestige than achieving any lasting political change on the island. His forces withdrew, and despite the initial Roman presence, Britain was left to its own devices. In the wake of Caesar's departure, the Togodumnus, under leaders like Cunobelinus, became the dominant force in southeastern Britain. While not directly governed by Rome, the Togodumnus engaged in trade and diplomacy with the empire, often benefiting from the exchange of goods like metals, wine, and luxury items, while maintaining their independence. In the years that followed, Rome's attention turned inward, grappling with political instability and military challenges. The Roman Empire saw a series of emperors rise and fall, with periods of civil war and unrest, which kept the empire occupied with its own internal matters. During this time, Britain remained largely outside of Rome's immediate concerns, though it continued to engage with the empire through trade. Almost a century later, in 41 AD, the Roman Empire was in a period of transition. Emperor Caligula, known for his erratic and tyrannical reign, had been assassinated, his young successor, Claudius, ascended to the throne. Claudius, a man who had long been underestimated due to his physical disabilities, including a limp, a stammer, and possibly cerebral palsy, was seen by many as an unlikely candidate for emperor. However, Claudius proved to be a shrewd strategist, using his perceived weakness to his advantage. He downplayed his own abilities, allowing his rivals to underestimate him, while quietly building alliances with key military commanders and political figures. After consolidating his power, Claudius sought a major military achievement to bolster his reputation and strengthen his legitimacy. He knew that the best way to secure his place in Roman history was through conquest. His decision to invade Britain was driven by a combination of motives: desire for wealth, the prestige of a successful campaign, and a need to leave a lasting legacy. Britain, with its untapped resources of grain, metals, and luxury items like pearls and animal skins, offered a tempting prize. The Roman Empire, still reeling from Caligula's excesses, needed a victory to restore its confidence. More than just wealth, Britain represented an opportunity to demonstrate Rome's power beyond its borders, reaffirming the empire's might and reach in the face of internal turmoil. Meanwhile, the Catuvellauni chieftain Cunobelinus had passed away, leaving his sons, Caratacus and Togodumnus, to continue his legacy. Under their leadership, the Catuvellauni had not only maintained control over their traditional territory, but also subdued additional lands, extending their dominion over much of the southern half of England. By this time, the Catuvellauni were one of the most powerful tribes in Britain, their reach extending from the Thames River to the western reaches of the modern-day counties of Hampshire and Wiltshire. However, their position of power was soon to be threatened by a much larger force. In 43 AD, 2 years after Cunobelinus's death, the Roman invasion force, led by the experienced general Aulus Plautius, assembled near Bologna in what is now northern France. Surviving sources assert that Plautius's deputy was none other than Severus Galba, a future Roman emperor, known for his role in the civil wars that would later engulf the empire. Galba, then a young and lesser-known officer, would eventually rise to the throne in a period of instability, but his early career in Britain would be a crucial part of his future military legacy. The army, which included 4 Roman legions and numerous auxiliary troops, totaled approximately 45,000 men, an imposing force by any measure. The Roman soldiers were divided into specialized units: light and heavy infantry, cavalry, and a substantial contingent of auxiliaries, often recruited from conquered or allied peoples, who played a crucial role in the expansion of Roman influence. Though it is unsure how, the Catuvellauni learned of the Roman preparations. Intelligence gathering was crucial in the ancient world, and scouts or emissaries might have reported the movements of the Roman legions across the Channel. The presence of Roman ships near the French coast would likely have been noticed by local informants. Its chieftains began assembling warriors nearby Kent. Kent, being the closest point to the European mainland, was the logical area for the British to defend. Crossing the English Channel was a daunting prospect for many soldiers, particularly those who had never seen the open sea. The Romans and most of their auxiliaries were not natural seafarers, and many in the legions harbored a deep fear of the unpredictable waters separating Gaul from Britain. Some believed Britain to be an island of strange supernatural forces, rumors that had circulated since Julius Caesar's expeditions nearly a century earlier. As a result, a mutiny broke out at the point of assembly, with soldiers refusing to board the ships. Aulus Plautius, faced with an unexpected crisis, struggled to restore order. It was only after invoking the authority of Emperor Claudius and, according to some accounts, making a stirring appeal to the soldiers' sense of duty and honor, that the rebellion was quelled. News about the mutiny reached the Catuvellauni chieftains as well, leading them to disband the army and assume they were safe. However, the Catuvellauni did not learn of the Romans subsequently quelling the mutiny, continuing with their invasion plans. The Roman invasion force likely landed at Richborough, near the estuary of the River Stour, facing no opposition. Richborough provided the Romans with an ideal landing site. It allowed them to quickly establish a foothold on British soil and move inland, securing vital resources and supplies for their campaign. The Romans likely moved westward along firm ground near the waterlogged area in East Kent, protected on their right flank from potential attacks. The geography of the area played an important role in the Romans' strategy. By moving along the relatively firm ground near the coastline, they minimized the risk of being ambushed by the surrounding marshes, which were difficult to navigate and would have been detrimental to the effectiveness of a large army. This gave the Romans the opportunity to consolidate their position and prepare for further engagements. Dio reported that initial skirmishes occurred at Canterbury, where warriors attempted to hinder the Romans, and this served as a delaying tactic to allow other warrior groups to assemble for a main defensive position along the west bank of the River Medway. The Cantiaci, friendly to Rome, quickly surrendered at Canterbury, while the Dobuni, who had travelled a long distance to join the British force, likely remained to delay the invaders in East Kent. A small Roman garrison was likely left at Canterbury to build a fort, possibly as a fallback position. As the Roman army moved towards the west, British forces, having been recalled from various regions, assembled, most likely on the west bank of the River Medway. The River Medway, with its difficult terrain and natural defences, was an ideal location for the British to launch a counterattack, hoping to delay the Roman progress further. The Roman army was likely divided into 4 legions, as they deployed on the Medway River's east bank. The British commanders established their tactical headquarters on the high ground south of Hulling, overlooking the River Medway. The location of the British headquarters was strategically chosen for its elevated position, which gave them a commanding view of the battlefield and allowed for a better defense against the Roman legions. The high ground near Harling would have been a natural choice for any commander seeking to gain an advantage over the enemy. Plautius conducted a survey along the River Medway. His experience in military campaigns made him well suited for this strategic survey of the area. Plautius would have been meticulous in studying the terrain and looking for the best opportunities to strike the British forces. When his scouts informed Plautius of a sizable British presence, he positioned his legions accordingly and prepared for battle. Always cautious but decisive, he knew the importance of setting up his forces in a way that would allow them to exploit the weaknesses of the British defenders. The Roman legion's ability to move swiftly and position themselves advantageously was one of their key strengths. The 9th Legion, known as Legio IX Hispana, was one of the oldest and most experienced legions in the Roman military. Originally formed between 65 and 58 BC, it had a long history of combat experience, particularly in Hispania, modern Spain, where it fought in the early days of the Roman conquest. It was placed on the right wing of the Roman formation, tasked with holding the line and potentially flanking the enemy. Its solid reputation in battle made it an ideal force for the crucial early phases of the engagement. The 14th Legion, under the leadership of Gnaeus Hosidius Gaeta, was also a highly capable unit. Established by Julius Caesar during his campaigns in Gaul, the 14th Legion was an experienced and disciplined force. It was positioned at the right center of the Roman formation, where it provided vital support in the battle's early stages. Its strategic placement allowed it to act as a backup for the other legions, ensuring that the Romans maintained control and flexibility as the battle unfolded. On the far left wing, the 20th Legion, known for its decisive role in numerous Roman campaigns, was stationed with the primary task of anchoring the Roman line and preventing any potential encirclement by the British forces. To its right, the 2nd Legion, famed for its steadfastness and reliability, was positioned to provide additional support for the advancing legions. The 2nd Legion's solid reputation as a dependable force made it a valuable part of the Roman formation, reinforcing the other legions and ensuring the integrity of the Roman strategy. Among the commanders was Vespasian, the legate of the 2nd Legion. Vespasian, who would go on to become Emperor of Rome, was already showing the qualities that would define his leadership. He was described as a strong and well-formed individual with a practical and restrained demeanor. Despite his future status as emperor, he maintained a reputation for modesty, which resonated with the Roman military and citizens alike. His belief in justice and frugality ensured his popularity among his soldiers, who saw him as a man of the people. The Roman historian Suetonius described Vespasian as a leader who earned the loyalty and respect of his men through his actions and character. His leadership style made him a beloved figure in the Roman military. particularly in times of crisis. Vespasian's later rise to emperor marked the beginning of the Flavian dynasty, which would see the construction of iconic structures like the Colosseum. Once all troops were deployed, the Romans launched their coordinated attack against the Britons. Roman legionaries rushed to the riverbank, and some even pretended to begin crossing it. Briton warriors rushed to parts of the river where they thought Romans would cross, but then the Romans simply returned to their ranks. The use of feints, or false attacks, was a common Roman tactic designed to draw the enemy's attention away from the real target. By employing such tactics, the Romans sought to undermine British morale and confuse their commanders, forcing them into making defensive mistakes. Meanwhile, the real attack started with the Batavians, known for their river-crossing skills, swimming downstream to a possible ford location. The Batavians, a Germanic tribe known for their exceptional skills in waterborne operations, were selected for this crucial task because of their ability to navigate rivers and swamps, making them ideal for the surprise river crossing. Elsewhere, they crossed the Medway River at a poorly defended location. The Batavians' successful crossing of the River Medway was a devastating blow to the British, catching them off guard. The element of surprise allowed the Romans to gain the upper hand early in the battle. As the British only half-heartedly deployed along the riverbank, with many warriors still in the fields, the Batavians managed to circumvent some of the British forward positions. The British, already stretched thin, were caught off guard by the speed and precision of the Roman attack. They launched an attack against the chariots and cavalry positioned in the vanguard, injuring the horses that pulled chariots. The British chariots, typically an advantage because of their mobility in battle, were vulnerable to the Batavians' surprise attack. They were used to charge enemy lines, intimidate and scatter infantry, but the Romans had long understood how to deal with such tactics. The losses of these fast-moving units forced the British charioteers to abandon their traditional role and fight as slower-moving infantry instead. This shift greatly weakened the cohesion and effectiveness of the British forces. The Batavians targeted the horses pulling them, thereby neutralizing a key element of the British forces. In a very short amount of time, the Batavians neutralized most of the cavalry and chariots. Not having to fear a fierce charge when crossing the river allowed the Roman commanders to plan their subsequent advance. The remainder of the Roman army prepared to attack, as the Batavians were embroiled in severe combat, with warriors launching attacks against them from every side. Plautius decided to make the initial river crossing using one of his 4 legions. He chose the 2nd Legion, led by Vespasian. The 2nd Legion found a narrow point of the river, crossing it. As the Romans waded through the water and emerged on the other bank, they suffered fierce attacks by British warriors. This was a dangerous moment for the Romans, as the British warriors had the advantage of terrain. The Romans were vulnerable in this stage, but their disciplined formations allowed them to withstand the onslaught. The British fighters, though fierce, could not break the Roman lines. Once across, the Romans threw up their shields, blocking any warriors surging to attack them, to create a landing ground for more troops on the far bank as they continued the fight. The plan was for multiple Roman legions to begin crossing the ford as the Brits, on high alert, launched attacks against any Roman soldier emerging on the river's west bank. On the other side of the bank, the Roman legions moved systematically, with each legion crossing in succession, ensuring that there was no gap in the Roman defense or offensive capability as they built up forces on the far side. Despite the attacks, the Romans managed to seize more land bit by bit, repelling the ferocious attacks. Although the British forces continued launching charges, the Romans' superior tactics and organization ensured that they could slowly gain ground, despite the constant pressure from the defenders. While the 2nd Legion continued crossing the river, Geta's 14th Legion advanced to attack the main British force in the north. This was another key target for the Romans, as it was crucial to neutralize any remaining concentrated British forces that could pose a serious threat to the advancing legions. Once the 14th Legion secured the crossing, the 9th Legion likely followed to reinforce the Roman position on the other side of the river. The 9th Legion's support was crucial in ensuring that the Romans did not overextend themselves and could continue to advance without being overwhelmed by British counterattacks. The 20th Legion remained on the east bank to protect the left flank from potential British attacks from the south, a less aggressive role strategically, but one that was nonetheless essential to the success of the operation. This defensive position allowed the Romans to ensure that their flank was secure, while the other legions engaged the main British force on the western bank. The 14th Legion bore the brunt of the British resistance, as it was positioned at the heart of the Roman advance, directly engaging the main British force. The 9th Legion likely defended the ground to the west and south of the 14th Legion, preventing British skirmishing at Getta's rear. This defensive stance was critical, as British warriors were known for their hit-and-run tactics, which could have disrupted the Roman formations if not contained. As the two sides clashed in close combat, the battlefield became a tumultuous scene of hand-to-hand fighting. Unlike the structured, organized formations of the Roman legions, the British warriors relied on aggressive charges, attempting to break the Roman lines through sheer ferocity. The Romans, however, maintained their famous testudo and cohort formations, using discipline and training to counter the wild but courageous British attacks. Roman legionaries, armed with their iconic gladii and protected by lorica segmentata armor, engaged in fierce combat with the British warriors, who fought with a mix of weapons, including spears, swords, and shields. The Romans also made use of their pilum, a heavy throwing javelin designed to pierce shields and disrupt enemy formations before the clash of melee combat. The densely packed Roman formations sought to push forward, using their shields not just for defense, but also as weapons to shove and break the momentum of British warriors. Both sides fought fiercely to gain the upper hand. The battle lasted for such a long time that night fell during combat, a rare occurrence in ancient warfare, as battles were typically decided before dusk. Both sides continued fighting into a second day, an event almost unheard of in Roman military history. Roman battles were often decided in hours, relying on overwhelming discipline and strategy, but here, the tenacity of the British warriors forced an extended conflict. However, eventually, the Romans gained the upper hand, defeating the worn-out warriors at every quarter. The British forces, having fought without respite, began to lose cohesion, while the Romans, despite their exhaustion, continued pressing forward. The final British resistance occurred on the high ground overlooking the river just south of Harling. High ground was a natural defensive position, allowing the remaining British warriors to mount a last desperate stand against the Roman advance. However, the Romans, skilled in siege tactics and battlefield maneuvers, likely used their superior coordination to encircle and crush the last British defenders. Togodumnus was killed or died soon after, possibly leading the last stand, while his brother Caratacus regrouped the remaining British forces and fled north towards their capital. Dio mentions Geta receiving honors for his achievements in the battle, probably commanding the attacking 14th Legion. This victory led to the British defeat and withdrawal. With the Medway crossing secured and the main British force scattered, the Romans had effectively removed the first major obstacle in their conquest of Britain, paving the way for a deeper push into the island. After a relentless two-day battle, the Britons found themselves defeated, and the Romans secured a solid foothold on the island. The River Medway had been a critical barrier, and with it overcome, the Roman war machine could now advance deeper into Britain with fewer natural obstacles in its path. From this newly established position, they embarked on the arduous journey of conquering this foreign land. While the conquest had been launched with grand ambitions, the realities of governing and pacifying Britain proved far more complex than a simple military campaign. The rugged terrain, fierce resistance, and lack of centralized control among the Britons meant that even when Rome claimed victory in one region, unrest could flare up in another. As with many military campaigns driven by short-term political objectives, a well-defined exit strategy was notably absent. The invasion of Britain was partly meant to bolster Claudius's prestige in Rome, proving his strength as emperor. However, This political motivation did not translate into a clear long-term plan for integrating Britain into the empire, leading to years of military entanglement and fluctuating control. Caratacus fled to Wales, where he became a Welsh hero for resisting Rome. Unlike many other British leaders who submitted to Roman rule, Caratacus continued his defiance, using the mountainous terrain to wage a guerrilla war against the invaders. Caratacus's final resistance battle occurred in 50 AD, resulting in his capture by Publius Ostorius Scapula. After years of resisting, he was finally betrayed by the Queen of the Brigantes, Cartimandua, who handed him over to the Romans in exchange for political favor. Unlike many of Rome's enemies, Caratacus was not executed, but was instead paraded in Rome as part of a triumph. When given the chance to speak before the emperor, he delivered a dignified and eloquent speech that so impressed Claudius that his life was spared. He would live out his remaining years in Rome, a prisoner, but one who had earned the respect of his captors. Thank you for watching this video. Please leave a like. It really helps out the channel. If there is a topic, battle, or person you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and you want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 per month, you will gain early access to all my videos without any in-video advertisements. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.